Good morning, everybody. My name is Michael Pollowan. I'm the past chair of the Jewish Federation of Ottawa and the chair of the Communications and Community Relations Committee. Welcome to the Jewish Federation of Ottawa's first election roundtable. Today, we are meeting with candidates for the Conservative Party of Canada, Matt Triemstra in Nepean and Carol Clemenhagen in Ottawa Centre. Welcome, Matt and Carol, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Michael.
And thank you to all the members of the community who have joined us this morning. The roundtable will last no more than 1 hour, and the format will be as follows. Matt and Carol will each have 2 minutes for opening remarks. My apologies, but this time limit will be vigorously enforced. With appreciation to members of Federation's Communications and Community Relations Committee and our board chair and chairman, they have prepared questions on issues of concern to the community, and both candidates will have an opportunity to answer. If you have a question, if you're watching this and you have a question for our candidates, please submit them using the Q&A function, which you will find at the bottom of your screen. And our moderator and Federation CEO, Andrea Friedman, will moderate a Q&A. After the Q&A, each candidate will have a brief opportunity for closing remarks. So I'm happy to get things started with the first question. Let's start with anti-Semitism. It's a matter which is foremost on the minds of our community due to a dangerous rise in it. Every year, Federation, synagogues, and other community institutions invest significant resources in security. While we are grateful for the federal security infrastructure program, it does not come anywhere near to covering all of our security needs. Will you support a federal rebate to cover some of the costs of the unfortunately necessary security guards for places of worship and other sites targeted for hate?
Michael, I'm happy to answer the question. Did we want to start with the opening statements, though?
Complete apology. Let's do that, shall we? See, that's what happens when Andrea gives you a script and says, stick to the script. Opening statements, 2 minutes each.
Well, Carol, I'm happy to go first.
Please do.
So good morning, everybody. Thank you for logging in at 8 a.m. Frankly, I've lost track of all time and what date it is in the calendar in this campaign. It's been very exciting to campaign, but as I already introduced, I'm Matt Triemstra, the Conservative candidate in Nepean, and I'm happy to be here this morning. I'm new to politics. It's my first time running, although I am born and raised in Nepean. So let me just tell you about myself. I've been married for 17 years to my wife, Shayla. We do have 3 kids, ages 15, 11, and 9. I also live in a multi-generational house with my mom. I have a background working on Parliament Hill, paired with a decade of working in the private sector, and I'm guided by the belief that we have to be compassionate in all we do. And I saw that firsthand and was guided by that compassion when I was chair of the board of the Ottawa Mission. Relevant for our discussion today, I'm also a man of faith. And I've been a lifelong Christian, so I understand what it means to live a life of faith and service. I'm here today both to answer your questions, but also to listen and to learn so that I can better advocate on your behalf. For me personally, I'm running on 3 main issues that I've seen impact my family and my entire community, and that is kind of the affordability of houses, the affordability of life in general, and mental health, which has really come into focus, I think, because of this pandemic. I saw firsthand the impacts of the mental health on our family and community, and I saw the increased anxiety and frustration in my kids during COVID, and I saw it when I volunteered with the mission as well. So simply, I'm running because I think we can do better for Canadians. We've got a great plan to get 1 million new homes built, to develop and support 1 million jobs that were lost, and to lower everyday costs and bills for Canadians. So in this election, I think there's a clear choice between a conservative plan to empower and support all Canadians, and a liberal plan to support their plans and priorities. So thanks for having this conversation. I think it's an important one, and I'm glad we're having it during the campaign, but I'm also looking forward to having this discussion each and every day after the campaign, after Carol and I are elected.
Thanks, Matt. Carol?
Thank you.
Sorry, go ahead.
2 minutes.
2 minutes.
2 minutes. Thank you so much, Michael. I'm Carol Clemenhagen, the candidate in Ottawa Centre, and I'd like to start off by taking a moment to wish everyone a happy and healthy new year. I've been doing a lot of door knocking in Ottawa Centre. It really is the down-to-earth reality check of politics, and people do tell you what they're thinking about. There is frustration at the doors about an unnecessary election call, and there's stress about a rising cost of living. Seniors mention healthcare concerns. Young families are having worries about housing options and the increasing price of housing. The dominant theme, I would say, is very much post-COVID economic recovery. So personally, I want politics to be about collaboration and accountability. And our Conservative Recovery Plan follows that path to build federal, provincial, and municipal collaboration in important public policy areas like climate change, strengthening healthcare. And I'm particularly proud of our Conservative commitment to unconditional health transfers to the provinces and increasing the growth rate of those transfers. For example, Hillel Lodge, I have had the opportunity to visit. I was there yesterday speaking with residents about their concerns, their top of mind issues going into the election. So that's a superb healthcare facility, but like other long-term care facilities, there's quite a lengthy waiting list. So the unconditional federal health transfers to the provinces to increase flexibility is really important. It's my pleasure to be here this morning, and I look forward to an exchange and to learning about issues of concern to the community.
So thank you both very much. And let me go back to where I was. So first question, let's start with anti-Semitism, which is foremost on the minds of our community members. There's been a dangerous rise in it. Every year, federations, synagogues, and other community institutions invest significant resources in security. We are grateful for the federal security infrastructure program, but it doesn't cover all of our security needs. Not near it. Will you support a federal rebate to cover some of the costs of the unfortunately necessary security guards for our places of worship and other sites targeted for hate? All right, who's taking it first?
Well, I'll jump in here, Michael. Let me just say, I think we're all horrified by the rise of hate crimes. I think for anti-Semitism, I believe I've read a report that say we have 7 new instances a day. So it's completely unacceptable. I've often been ridiculed for my Christian faith, but in Ottawa, I've never been persecuted for it. And I don't think that's right. I'm glad that the security infrastructure program, I think it's a program launched by the last Conservative government. I'm glad it continued, and we've heard the same feedback that doesn't go far enough. One of the key problems is you kind of have to justify that you've been the victim of hate before you can get to it. So we need to change that, right? We shouldn't have to wait for a hate motivated crime before becoming eligible to it. And I think we have to broaden the list of expenses, including security guards, and paying to train volunteers. So those are all commitments that we're going to make around the security infrastructure program.
Michael, I would echo those comments. In the Conservative Recovery Plan, there's actually quite a robust section on security and safety. So there's certainly an understanding of the importance of the issue, and particularly concerning the Jewish community, because that anti-Semitism is the oldest scourge, and it's something that we need to really be conscious of on an ongoing basis. So I would say that there's an openness to doing the best thing possible to provide that sense of security that unfortunately has been reduced, in particular during the pandemic. The other point I would make is the importance of education in schools, because
So Carol,
Yes,
Carol?
sorry. Yes.
The next question will be on education, so
Okay.
let's we'll wait for that.
Sounds good.
So thanks to both of you. The next question will come from our board chair, Ian Sherman.
Good morning, Carol and Matt. Thank you for being with us. Given its seriousness and prevalence, let's stick with the topic of anti-Semitism. Education about the Holocaust is extremely important to prevent all future genocides. While some schools and districts do a good job on Holocaust education, unfortunately, many do not, and this is too important to leave to chance. Will you support the creation of a standardized national social studies curriculum that focuses on anti-Semitism and the Holocaust and is informed by expert research?
I'll perhaps start on that one. I think that's a wonderful idea because that provides a framework that can be improved on over time. It's a starting point. It's something that really can unify resources, I guess, around finding the way to reach young people as years progress. And current generations have less connection to World War II period of time or the post-war generation. There has, I believe, been studies to say that there's actually a less understanding and awareness in younger members of the younger population about the Holocaust and the genocide that occurred there. So we really need to be, I think, focused on making sure that everyone continues to understand what happened and why we need to stand against hate together.
Yeah, maybe I'll just add in there and just say, from a personal perspective, I'm about to approach my 40s, and I had very little education in Indigenous and residential schools. But that has completely changed now. And my child in high school, is getting that education. And I think school boards have been very quick to adopt, LGBTQ training, racism training, but there's been very little, I think, in anti-Semitism. I was very proud of my friends, Lisi Leviton, for sponsoring a motion at our local school board to set up a task force to combat anti-Semitism in Ontario. So kids should never feel threatened, especially in school. And I think education is absolutely part of the answer.
Hey, thanks to both of you. Our next question will come from Tamara Fathi.
Thanks, Michael, and good morning, Carol and Matt. Let's switch focus to international relations and the Jewish state of Israel. Israel is the only country in the world routinely criticized when she defends herself against terrorist attacks, as we saw most recently this past May. Will you urge the government to support unequivocally when Israelis must defend themselves from terrorism?
Yes.
Absolutely. I think Israel is one of Canada's closest allies, and we absolutely support Israel's right to defend itself. So it's an easy yes.
Okay, that was a quick one.
That's a quick question.
Thanks to both of you, and thanks, Tamara. Next question from Jonathan Friedman. Jonathan, you're on mute and your camera's off.
Okay.
There we go.
Hi. My name's Jonathan Friedman, and my question is, Israeli citizens, poll after poll, show that they've been yearning for years to live in peace in our ancestral homeland. Many Palestinian citizens also crave the ability to live in peace. However, this hope is seriously impeded by policies of the Palestinian Authority encouraging terrorism. Will you call on the PA to stop rewarding terrorists and cease their pay-to-slave program?
Sorry, I'm happy to start with that one. Absolutely. It seems like it should always be a part of Canada's position. Since we list Hamas and Islamic Jihad and others as in the region as terrorist groups, we should not be working with any government that supports or promotes that kind of hatred and violence. We would never tolerate that kind of hate or group in Canada, and we should not tolerate killing and terrorism elsewhere either.
I think we're all looking forward to a conservative government where foreign policy, as Mr. O'Toole has described it, really Canada comes back to its principled stance on issues, working with friends and allies to promote peace, certainly defend human rights. So I see that role of Canada as the middle power country that can really indicate internationally our unconditional support for Israel and peace in the Middle East. So that means really speaking out when it's necessary to call out terrorism clearly, but also to be a force to support efforts to move towards a viable two-state solution. That is the long-term goal for all of us, really, to see peace in the Middle East.
Hey, thank you to both of you. Just a reminder to those who are watching, if you wish to submit a question, please do so using the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. Our next question will come from Ali Grant.
Thanks, Michael, and thanks for joining us, Carol and Matt. My first question, I actually have two. One is that Canada adopted the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People, or UNDRIP, earlier this year. And I'm wondering, if elected, how will you work to prioritize and quickly implement UNDRIP to support Indigenous people living in Canada?
You want to go first, Carol? Sorry.
No problem. I believe that the leader has actually identified a number of the recommendations that need to be fast-tracked, particularly concerning unmarked graves in residential schools. So there's actually no reason why we haven't moved forward on specific recommendations that have been there on paper, on the books for some time. And there is a definite commitment by the Conservative Party to follow reconciliation, to have a forward-looking approach to reconciliation that is, in many respects, led by Indigenous peoples, so that we're moving forward together to embrace a future which will be better for Indigenous peoples and Canadians as a whole.
Yeah, I mean, Kara mostly stated the position. I'll just add that absolutely UNDRIP has affirmed the rights of Indigenous communities to pursue economic opportunities and benefits from development of resources and traditional territories. And we're going to respect and we're going to uphold those rights. We're going to work with Indigenous-led organizations to support the communities they want to support, to grow jobs, to support clean drinking water, offer increased training and hiring at local communities, and much more. So yes, we're going to be supporting UNDRIP.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So I'll just add a point. One of the areas that Indigenous peoples have been flagging is their desire to take ownership in certain natural resources projects and pursue the economic benefits of those projects in their local communities. And those are things that I think the Conservative Party will very much support. It's Indigenous-led, and it's really moving forward to get at those economic barriers that perhaps have been preventing Indigenous peoples from really benefiting from the resources of the country.
Thank you. My next question is on the blood ban. So during times of chronic shortages in Canada's blood supply, LGBTQ plus Canadians want to help save lives, but unfortunately Canadian Blood Services prohibits many of these individuals from donating blood unless they have been celibate for at least 3 months. Will you support an end to the blood ban on LGBTQ plus donations and instead use scientific screening methods to keep our blood supply safe?
Well, I love it when questions get asked that have very easy, straightforward answers. The answer is yes. It is overdue. We will finally end it. My friend Eric Duncan has been on the front lines leading our efforts on this. I was happy to have him at one of my opening barbecues. We're going to support him and we're going to support finally ending it.
The Canadian Blood Services are moving and should move quickly to a behavior-based screening process for blood donations. So that effectively ends the ban and proceeds to a science-based approach to screening of donors for blood donations.
Thank you.
Thank you both. Our next question comes from Ian Sadinsky.
Good morning, Matt and Carol. And I noticed in your opening remarks, you both mentioned the very important issue of housing. And Carol, you mentioned that you visited Hill Lodge. One of the Federation beneficiary agencies is Tamir, which looks after members of our community with developmental disabilities. So mine is a special housing question. The National Housing Strategy, or NHS, includes important commitments to fund up to 2,400 new housing units for people with developmental disabilities. Will you continue the National Housing Strategy and increase capital and operating funding investments for ethnocultural affordable housing initiatives?
Yeah. One of the reports that came out of the Parliamentary Budget Office just last month in August looked at what the Liberal National Housing Strategy was doing and to analyze whether it was meeting objectives. And there were some concerning findings from the Parliamentary Budget Officer that, for example, community housing supports were actually being reduced, and that there was a sense that the Liberal Housing Strategy had not met its objectives in terms of influencing the overall prevalence of housing needs. So clearly there's work to be done on housing in particular, and revisiting, I think, the strategy as it stands now to see where gaps have occurred and find ways to fill those gaps. I think you probably heard in the media that our firm commitment to build a million houses in 3 years, but that's very much aimed at a general population. We need to really look at, as you point out, specific areas where housing need is so critical and we may not be meeting that need adequately at the moment.
Yeah, I think I would echo Carol's remarks. You know, housing is a huge priority of the Conservative Economic Recovery Plan. Aaron O'Toole was actually in Barrhaven to make the announcement, right? And so absolutely, there's an issue of supply about building a million homes. You know, we need to ban foreign ownership, you know, for people who buy and don't want to live here. And I think the government can really lead by example here, right? The government is already the biggest real estate holding in the country. And so with more public servants working from home and with maybe vacant space, we're actually going to release 15% of government assets to be used for you know, dwellings and home ownership, right? So I think we can lead by example. I think we can release our assets so that the housing can just get built. And so housing is absolutely core to what we're doing. I appreciate what you have raised, you know, around disability. And I think I echo Carol's comments that that has to be taken into account.
Thank you.
Hey, thank you both for that. We're now going to move to the open forum Q&A moderated by Andrea. As a reminder, please submit your questions in the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. Andrea.
Good morning, everyone. And Matt, Carol, thank you so much for joining us. We have a few questions already in the chat, and I'll do my best to ask them. So we saw a significant increase in anti-Semitism following the May hostilities between Israel and Hamas. We know, as we discussed before, that Jews are the #1 targeted group for hate, and at the same time seem to receive the least amount of attention. One of the hallmarks of some of the things that we've seen on the streets of our Canadian cities are swastikas. And so the question is, will a conservative government make it illegal to feature and carry swastikas and the symbols of other terror organizations, including Hamas, Hezbollah, the Taliban, etc.?
Yeah, we've actually seen, even in this election, we have seen Jewish candidates, get targeted and their signs vandalized, with symbols of hate, right? And so, it's just terrible, and it has no place. Look, I don't think I can set policy, for the Conservative Party on this, but I agree that those symbols have no place in our culture, and we should do everything we can to penalize their use.
I would agree. Certainly, these are hate motivated symbols, and they're often used in hate motivated vandalism. So we need to definitely tackle that and stand up to it, call it out when it happens, so that people again will understand the significance of it and how it hurts all of us. It's not just the community that is being immediately targeted. It actually hurts all of Canadian society when those symbols are used. It gets back to our earlier discussion about education as well. I think we do need to focus on making sure that future generations understand the significance of those symbols and why they are hateful symbols.
So thank you both for that. That's actually an excellent segue to the next question that somebody's asked. Our country's undergone quite a reckoning in the last couple of months with the findings of the horrific unmarked graves from our residential school system. And as part of that reckoning, there's been calls to change the names of Canadian institutions and the like for people who were architects of the residential school system. We see unsavory names that affect the Jewish community across Canada, things like Swastika Street in Guelph as an example. I'm just curious to know, will a Conservative government ensure resolutions of these matters against all groups, including the Jewish community?
Those are very much oftentimes community-based discussions that need to happen, so that communities just determine what names, I guess, of streets are accorded as we move forward. And they should also be looking at names of streets that were historically there for whatever reason, whether they should be revisited. There's a sense as well of certainly the importance of that, to have an organized discussion of it. So not, for example, tearing down statues or some of the more unsettling things that were happening after the discovery of more and more unmarked graves. For example, it seemed to have led to churches being vandalized and even burnt, I suppose, a subject of arson. So the process needs to be a thoughtful one, so that we understand the context and understand why we're moving to change names of streets. I guess I want history to be looked at with humility, that we understand the context of history, because that's going to help us make better decisions about correcting mistakes, reorganizing ourselves around our current values, but that it's not a process that leads to more understanding, more misunderstanding as opposed to less misunderstanding. I think we can do that. We can be organized at the community level, and we can make decisions that make sense both morally and on principle, but also that bring the community along with us.
I think I'll just like understand. Well said.
Okay, thank you. So the next question is probably a little bit more of a provincial responsibility and municipal, but nonetheless, I think it's helpful for people to understand what your thinking is from a general perspective on these issues. So we've seen, trying to get the wording on this question right, we've seen calls to defund or budget freeze around police forces, and it seems to me that this might result in more crime and the like. So the question is, what would you and a conservative government do to support our police officers, enforce prison terms through the courts, and reduce eligibility for bail for repeat offenders?
Yeah, that's a great question. All leaders and all politicians can stand up to denounce hate. I hope it's universally acceptable that, that hate has no place. But do the police have the tools they need to both identify the crimes and persecute, right, and bring justice to those that have committed those? And so absolutely. And I think so much of what we're seeing now as we go online and the tension between freedom of speech versus, standing up against hate crime, right? And so you're right that a lot of this comes down to the provinces, but I think we as the federal government can set the example and that we can provide the funding, right? And so I think very clearly in our program, we're going to give over 100 million to non-provincial police forces in areas like sexual exploitation, but also cybersecurity and online offenses, right? And we're actually going to do a specific 25 million just to law enforcement to allow them to rapidly follow up on online threats and hate speech, sexual exploitation and human trafficking, all of this, different disinformation campaigns, right? So how we have treated hate is changing with the nature of the internet. We need to keep pace with that. And the federal government needs to be at the forefront of funding police services so that we can do that. So we can actually bring to justice people who commit these crimes.
I think there's a really good emphasis in the Conservative Recovery Plan on additional funding, as Matt points out, training police, community policing, programs to keep youth out of gangs. Those are very positive moves forward, I believe, to ensure a sense of safety, right? People in their communities want to feel safe and want to be safe. So, and the police support is something that's critical to that.
Thank you both. One of the less wonderful parts of this campaign has been some of the really negative campaigning going on and some of the attacks specifically on our Prime Minister. And I'm curious to know from your perspective, as candidates, what has been the most surprising thing that you've encountered as candidates, both positive and negative?
I've been surprised by by a certain uncertainty in some people about vaccinations. I think perhaps because my career had been in healthcare, I may have assumed that people understood the importance of being vaccinated and embraced full vaccination. So I have encountered people at the door who have been misinformed about the safety of vaccines and are expressing real concerns about being vaccinated. So that has surprised me.
Yeah, look, sign vandalism in an election, I don't think is anything new. I think it happens every election. As a first-time candidate, it's certainly distressing to me to go down the street and see not just my signs, but all three candidates, to see them vandalized, often with spray paint, and messages of hate, and we're not going to be deterred. We take them down and we put up new ones. But instances too of the prime minister, being having things thrown at him, that's not acceptable. It has no place here. We need to make sure that our politicians can safely campaign across the country. And I'm distressed to see that. And, we pray that, it doesn't further escalate, but I think that has surprised me a little bit, how people think it's okay to take out their anger and frustration, on signs and people instead of just at the ballot box.
Go ahead, Carol.
For the most part, this isn't surprising. For the most part, people are remarkably welcoming and pleasant at the door. Even though we interrupt their supper, we wake up sleeping babies with door knocking. People are remarkably generous with their time to candidates.
Well, that's very good to hear. So we've all seen hate incitement on the internet. It is a real challenge for society as a whole. There is a counterbalance to that in terms of free speech, but it is complicated in terms of balancing those two issues, to balance shutting down hate speech and yet maintaining freedom of speech. So the question is, how will, trying to find the exact question, I guess the question is, what would a conservative government do to clamp down on hate incitement on the internet?
Yeah, listen, sorry, do you want to go ahead, Carol?
No, go ahead. Sorry, go ahead, please.
Yeah, look, I think our conservative recovery plan is pretty clear on this. So we need to fight online incitements and hatred clearly. And we need to criminalize statements that encourage other people to act out violently. We have to also protect, forms of free speech and criticism, but we cannot allow online incitement and hatred to fester. We've already talked a little bit about the money and resources that we are going to put towards that. I think that's leading where we can lead. And I think we need to, again, we've talked about social media and how do we adapt and how do we stop these things, but we need a stronger legal duty for social media platforms to remove illegal content, such as content that incites violence. So I think we have to have a conversation, with the social media platforms. We have to do that in partnership, but we can absolutely lead, as we should, by funding the police, by having those conversations, and by making it clear that hate has no place, whether it's in person or online.
I would agree that the first step really is to talk about the issue in a very serious way, because it is that dilemma between the freedom that we believe in terms of democratic values of free speech, but understanding that hate undermines those very values. So how do we strike the balance that's going to work? And so politicians in particular, and in particular the governing party in power, has a real responsibility to keep a careful watch on what is happening and not allow things to go undealt with. I think we have seen, perhaps if we look to our neighbors to the south in the United States, we have seen things get out of control, out of the framework in which reasonable people could figure out what was happening and deal with it. So I think in Canada, we have the ability to have those open conversations about the real issues and come to the best approach forward, which I would imagine in the Canadian tradition will be a balanced approach, a middle consensus approach that works for everybody.
Perfect, thank you. To switch gears a little bit, I'm just curious to better understand how you would work to ensure that Black-owned businesses have access to credits and the economic investments and economic investment opportunities.
There are a lot of measures in the Conservative Recovery Plan to help small businesses in particular recover. 25 to 50% of salaries for new hires for 6 months. Sort of very practical approaches to really recenter our small businesses as they come out of the pandemic, because it's been really tough for them. And they, of course, are so central to our vibrant community, our thriving community. So certainly the tax credits, supports, loan guarantees or loan forgiveness. There are a whole series of items in the Conservative Recovery Plan to help. I think as one of the things that if I am elected, I would like to have much more regular interaction with the business improvement areas. They are right at the grassroots level, understanding what's happening with their local businesses, the issues that are affecting how they're recovering or not. And so I think that local MPs can really reach out into the community and make sure they're aware of things on the ground. Just because you're a federal MP doesn't mean you can not be completely aware of local issues affecting everyday people in your riding.
Yeah, I would just add that, our plan, I think, has mechanisms to support Canadians in every sector of the economy. We're not going to single out different groups. We're going to support everybody, and that detailed plan is available. It's costed, and I agree on small business. There are businesses that are just struggling and they need people back at work, and we need to help support them. And you're going to hear a lot of things about a Conservative government eliminating the deficit in 10 years. I got to be honest, I don't know if we can do it, but we have to try. And the only way we can do it is we are not going to cut services to Canadians, and we're not going to do it on the backs of public servants, and Canadians themselves. But we have to achieve that through economic growth, which means investing in our businesses and ensuring that Black-owned businesses have access to credit, and the opportunities that they need. And I think that our recovery plan does that.
Thank you. Again, a complete pivot, different question from the audience, and it's about vaccines. So one of the somewhat contentious issues thus far in this campaign has been Conservative leader Erin O'Toole's lack of insistence that all Conservative candidates be vaccinated. And I'm curious to hear your perspective on that.
Yeah, no, that's a great one. Let me just start by saying, I'm fully vaccinated. My family's fully vaccinated. I think I and the leader have been very clear that if you can get vaccinated, you absolutely should. Vaccines are absolutely the best path out of this. In fact, we've also released a plan that we want to get to 90% vaccination rates to really hit, I think, herd immunity at that point. And we need to do that through incentives, and we need to do it through education, paid sick leave to take time off, a better information campaign to get to all people. So, this is a government, or our government is very committed to vaccines. Erin O'Toole is vaccinated. We want people to get vaccinated. We want to get to 90%. I think that is all very clear. What we're not going to do, though, is mandate it. And, I think there are issues of freedom of speech and choice for people in not getting vaccinated. There's also going to be a segment of the population that can't get vaccinated for medical reasons. So we are going to have to make exemptions for a small part of the population anyways. But if you're not going to get vaccinated, you have to accept reasonable restraints on your freedoms. And so for us, that means that if you're going to go to work and you're not going to be vaccinated, you've got to show a negative COVID test. If you want to get on a plane or a train or a bus, you have to show a negative COVID test. I think this is a reasonable approach. We're not going to hold people down and jab needles in their arms. I don't think that's the kind of state we want to be. And I would just end by saying, that it was Justin Trudeau who triggered this election during a fourth wave, and a necessary one. But in fact, our plan is not so different than the Chief Human Resource Officer plan for the Government of Canada itself, where they'll have to make reasonable people. So that's our plan. I think we've been pretty clear on it. And, I'm happy to keep on talking about it.
I'm also fully vaccinated, and clearly being vaccinated is the best way to protect ourselves and our loved ones and our community. I think the conservative approach is the correct one in promoting vaccination, as Matt said, getting up to 90% vaccination rate, and making sure that for those people who, for whatever reason, choose not to be vaccinated, that we find ways to bring them with us. I think we don't wish to create divisions between Canadians. We can better inform people about the benefits of vaccination. We can discuss vaccine hesitancy, and we can take measures to ensure that people who are not vaccinated are regularly have tests or proof of non-COVID infections, so that the community and individuals are protected. So I feel that that's the best approach, which doesn't put up artificial divisions between groups of people.
So I'm going to push a little bit more on this one, just because this has been quite an issue in the media. And Matt, I respect everything that you said about some people requiring a medical exemption, and of course you always have to honor that, and anything that violates human rights legislation. But you did say that people have a choice, and if you choose not to be vaccinated, that there will be certain constraints on your freedom. Why is the Conservative Party not willing to acknowledge that one of those constraints on your freedom is that you can't run for public office?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's a tough question. There are a lot of ways, that we can still be safe on the campaign trail. Look, I think that all of our candidates should, I want to be clear about that. That's my personal belief. But on the campaign trail, we have to follow all of our COVID protocols, right? And so for us, while door knocking, that means, we drop off the literature, ring the doorbell, and then take 8 feet back, right? And so vaccinated or not, can follow that public health protocol, right? I hope that candidates, if there are any, are following every protocol that they can. Another reason why we shouldn't have had an election during this pandemic. So look, I think you should be vaccinated. I absolutely agree. And for those that aren't, they better be following all the COVID protocols as set out by, the local health jurisdiction.
It is a very good question. And I think one of the things that did happen was this election campaign has been so compressed, and we found ourselves thrown into an election during a time when variants of concern were increasing, and in fact, infection rates were increasing. And I think we're learning as we go forward. So personally, I would have no difficulty with a policy that suggested that every candidate be fully vaccinated. In our campaign, we wear masks in the office and at every door. It's one of the things, if volunteers come on board to door knock with us, we inform them of the policy out of respect for the homeowner and out of respect for other volunteers who are there working with us.
Perfect. Well, thank you very much. Michael, I'm going to turn things back over to you in the interest of time.
Thank you, Andrea. Thank you to our audience for all of your questions. Carol and Matt, over to you for brief closing remarks. Carol, you first.
Thank you, Michael. So we all want a return to prosperity and a safe, healthy future. And our Conservative Recovery Plan, with fast-track investments, particularly in infrastructure, supports local priorities. I do criticize the Liberal government for having damaged public trust in government ethics and accountability. When governments set targets, I want to trust that we're likely to meet them. And in several areas, infrastructure, housing, for example, climate, Liberals have made somewhat extravagant claims and delivered few results. It's very tough for entrepreneurs now coming out of the pandemic. And as Ottawa Centre's MP, I will seek the advice on a regular basis from local business improvement areas. And with our conservative recovery plan. As your MP, I will get them the supports that will help our local businesses thrive. So on September 20th, I'm here to respectfully ask for your vote to secure the future. Shana Tova. Did I say that right?
You did.
Okay.
Matt?
Perfect. Well, let me just say that I think conversations like this are important ones to have, and not just at election time, and I recognize what I don't know, and I haven't lived the life of a Jewish person in Ottawa, and I respect your opinions. And I think everything we do, you should never be surprised by your government either, right? And so how do we form partnerships as candidates, as parties, with organizations like this in Ottawa, with the B'nai B'rith, with the recognized experts, right, to work together to make it safe to live and practice our faiths, whatever they are in this country. So that's my commitment here. We've got a great recovery plan. I think, you can download it, you can read all about it. Carol's mentioned a lot of the things about jobs and mental health, but if I put all of that aside, we want to be involved in these conversations. I want it to be safe for everybody to live out their faiths in this country. We need to crack down on anti-hate and crime. We need to fund our police forces to actually, bring justice to the victims of these crimes. And I am just so grateful to have these conversations together. I hope that we can learn from one another. I've learned a lot just even through the questions. In preparing this and in reading the documents. MPs are only as good as the people that they consult with and the stakeholders they meet with. And certainly that's my commitment to this group, to the people of Nepean, is elect me, in your riding. And, you have my commitment that I will fight for you, regardless of how you vote or regardless of our political differences. That's at the heart of our parliamentary democracy, where we stand up and fight for our constituents. And I hope to continue to do that with Ottawa's Jewish community. And I really am grateful for the opportunity to be here this morning.
Carol and Matt, thank you for joining us. We know this is really hectic, so you're presumably about to go out and burn off some more shoe leather and calories. We do appreciate you making the time to be with us this morning.
Michael,
Sorry?
I would just say I'd be remiss if I didn't say out loud that the advance poll is open today. So you afford to file your votes, right? So it starts today.
Carol, you did get the Shana Tova perfectly. You're about to hear another one that we are in the days of awe, which culminate in Yom Kippur, and our tradition holds that on Yom Kippur, the book of life for the coming year is sealed by God. And so thank you all for coming. Shana Tova and Gemar Chatima Tova. And I don't expect you to be able to get the pronunciation of that one correctly.
Next time, I'm on it.
Okay. Have a wonderful day, everybody.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.